Aloha and welcome back. This is a channel that I found pretty recently. It's Socialism for All, which intensifies class struggle. This video is Should the U.S. Left Trust Bernie Sanders? No. Forget the elections, build the party. Alright, so this guy talks a lot like me, a little bit different, but let's check him out.
Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is November 25, 2024. And in this video, we're going to talk about an email sent out by Bernie Sanders in which he suggested that he might start getting involved in backing candidates who take on both the Republicans and the Democrats. Is following Bernie Sanders a good idea at this point? I think it isn't, and we'll talk about why. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and consider supporting on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee at patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. There are links to Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee in the video description.
Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment.
Alright, so I want to start out by acknowledging the Status Coup YouTube channel, which is where I originally heard of the story in a video titled Bernie Sanders Hints at Starting Third Party. In that video, host Jordan Chariton reads an email from Bernie Sanders in which he allegedly does the hinting. I think it's a bit thin, but yes, there is something there in that direction. We're going to read that email later in the video, and we're also going to review Mike.
And on this video, status quo on Bernie Sanders hints at starting a third party. No, he does not. He did not start a third party. He doesn't want to start a third party, and he said not to start a third party, which I think is a terrible thing. So does Socialism for All.
Michael Parenti's comments on Bernie Sanders. Michael Parenti used to know Bernie Sanders and ran for office with him back in the 70s in Vermont. Parenti stayed friends with him but felt that by the late 90s, Bernie had basically adopted imperialist politics, particularly with regard to foreign policy. But I'm actually going to start out by sharing my thoughts on the situation, as this is a running thread that we've had since the beginning of this channel, as we've tried to track and understand the resurgence of the US left, particularly since 2008. This started out as a short commentary, but I wound up elaborating, so here goes. Yes, it is crucial for the U.S. working class to organize outside of both the Republican and Democratic parties. Both of these are controlled by big money, and you're not going to be able to develop independent proletarian class consciousness trying to organize within those parties. To date, the U.S. working class has had decade after decade to do something like that, and it has failed or refused to do so. While I have been of the opinion that Bernie Sanders had a very unique opportunity to lead a Dem exit into, for example, the Green Party, an established mass left party with a decent platform, household name recognition, and at least some infrastructure in basically every state, he
Right, imagine if he would have taken that movement to the Green Party.
did not do that. What he did instead in 2016 is, after a movement supporting him which spent hundreds of millions of dollars and untold volunteer hours to get that message moved forward, he rolled over for the Hillary Clinton machine when he was invited, actually, to join the Green Party and continue the movement within a party, well, basically whose platform he had ripped off, and which would support it. And whether he had actually run in 2016 or not, because Bernie had this big hang-up about getting Trump elected or being blamed for that, which the Democrats managed to do twice now without him, thank you very much.
Right.
He could have at least taken that invitation, joined the party, and then invited the tens of millions of people who had been supporting the campaign, many who had previously been involved in, for example, Occupy, which was sort of a loose and spontaneous response to the 2008 global financial crisis and all of the fallout, as well as just a lot of other issues that have been piling up over the years in the US. So the party could have been populated, they could have run candidates in 2018, then maybe more prominent presidential level candidates in 2020 or at least 2024, etc. But you start building a party. If I had to boil down my slogan right now, it would be forget the elections, build the party. Because any kind of a left party, particularly
I say do both, run in the elections and build the party.
in a system like the US electoral system, needs to be spending about 90 to 95% of its energy on year-round community organizing campaigns which do not involve getting someone elected to office. Or at the latest, Bernie Sanders could have done this in 2020 and he didn't do it, instead telling us a million times while the COVID-19 pandemic was taking shape and the official shutdowns were happening and everything, and Joe Biden was saying that we don't need Medicare because it's not going to help during the pandemic and everything else, how much of a good friend he was of Joe Biden. And he is a good friend. He said that like 10 times per sentence. So, in my opinion, if Bernie Sanders had been for real, that's what he would have done. He didn't do it. I don't think he's for real. And to be honest, if he does pop up with some new scheme, I think it's going to be only to mislead the working class. As I
Fight the oligarchy tour is what he's talking about. He hadn't named it yet back then, but he's not fighting the duopoly, so he's not really fighting the oligarchy.
said before, the U.S. working class absolutely does need to do independent organizing, but I don't think that Bernie at this point counts as independent. And after his performance over the last 10 or so years vis-a-vis the Democrats and basically screwing over the base, that's not the kind of leadership that is going to get us anywhere we want to go. As a communist, ultimately I believe that we need a vanguard party which is capable of leading the masses out of capitalism, and there's so much there that needs to be built. Yet every effort to actually do that has resulted in some kind of significant revisionism. So failing that for the moment, I'd at least like to see a mass party that's going to do the basics of union organizing and just getting the struggle more intensified. So the time to do that was actually decades ago. The fact that it's still basically on the same level or worse than it was, 20, 30 years ago is not good at all, to say the least. Because now you've got people like Bernie Sanders swooping in, I think, to do no good. If we look at something like Rajani P. Dutt's Fascism and Social Revolution, which is a comprehensive work analyzing the rise of fascism and particularly social democracy's role in that, we see that it tends to act as a cover for the capitalists while they are covertly building an improved fascist dictatorship, which they then roll out and sweep away the previous stage of social democracy. So in other words, we had many decades to do independent working class organizing. It didn't amount to much, and we still can't really stand on our feet as a class in this country. And now you've got basically an auxiliary of the Democratic Party who has this pseudo-independent branding, because really he just works for them. You should know that by now. Right, stepping forward to get more involved, perhaps.
I thought he was a real deal, but he's just, man, it sucks that he's just bringing people to the Democratic Party.
In quote-unquote challenges to the Democratic Party. Now you might say, well, didn't you just say that the independent efforts weren't going anywhere anyway? Objectively, yeah. However, we did see something of an upsurge this year in anti-Democratic Party sentiment, with the hated Donald Trump, who lost the last election, winning this one because of a collapse of support for Kamala Harris. So again, this is a bit speculative on my part, because Sanders has not come out with any clear plans yet. But if some kind of mainstream social democratic option emerges, headed by the likes of Bernie Sanders, who could have done this at any point in the last few decades, had a great opportunity to do it, and blew it, I think it's time to be very skeptical and honestly kind of concerned. I've seen a lot of support for something like this despite Bernie's betrayals in both the status quo video comments and on Twitter and on Reddit, and Bernie clearly does still have a lot of support and will be able to do some kind of grift, some kind of whatever this is, and people will be lining up for it, but I don't see this as having positive outcomes. I know
it's funny he's calling the oligarchy tour.
People don't want to hear, more bad news and really just want to believe in something, but I think this really could be dangerous. Again, I don't think that Bernie Sanders qualifies as independent politics at this point. He is basically a Democrat pretending not to be a Democrat. And before we read the email, I just want to state this one more time because I think that more astute listeners, more familiar with the concepts that I'm talking about, already will grasp what I'm trying to say here. But just one more time for the people in the back, why would this concern me more than the rise of the Green Party? Because, social fascism bad. Well, in either case, we as communists would need to keep agitating and educating, trying to guide and advise the movement that capitalism itself is the problem and the only way to get rid of it is revolution. Those are tasks of ours regardless of where the masses are organizing. But I think that something like the Green Party is a much more independent organization. And again, forget the elections, build the party. What you want is independent proletarian class consciousness and organizational vehicles which are not going to impede that and are going to act as ways to carry it forward in whatever campaigns the independent class conscious people involved deem fit. But
yeah, class conscious people, we need the workers to join the Green Party, to do the proletariat, to join the Green Party, to run some, vote, and educate, let people know about the Green Party and that the Democratic Party is, the duopoly is no different. The Democratic Party is no different than the Republicans.
My fear about the Bernie Sanders thing at this point, again looking at past historical movements, is that it's going to look like that to a lot of the less sophisticated people, but actually will be a straitjacket. Why do I think that the Green Party isn't that straitjacket? I've been involved with it. I don't see evidence of it. I see a party that is neglected. When they do have to talk about it, they bash it. It's struggling. It barely has any resources. It has a high turnover problem. And it's just basically reflective of all the other grassroots left organizations that I've seen. And one of the things that have contributed to this state of sort of high turnover, the party can't get off the ground, is I think a lot of Americans are really captured by bourgeois ideas. They want something slick. They want something prepackaged. That's how their tastes have been shaped, including in politics. I mean, how else do you explain anyone believing that the Republican Party, for example, in 2010 with the Tea Party, believing that, that party's going to work for the common person? It's absurd. It's still absurd now. But again, the Republicans are still a well-funded national party which just won the White House. And related to this capture...
But see, that's the biggest difference in the three parties. The Democrats and Republicans are well-funded. They're always going to be well-funded. And so they're always going to be able to win elections. The Green Party, as he said, it has a high turnover rate. It's not organized the best. And it does have a lot of problems. But the problems is because we need people. Like, the what do you call it? The corporations that fund the Democrats and the Republicans, they are high functioning. They understand what they are doing with business. They understand what they are doing with politics. And they understand how to get a Bernie Sanders to do all these rallies and stuff and keep the people who might join the Green Party from joining the Green Party. They do all kinds of organizing to keep us separate and unorganized and not being able to do. The Democrats, they sue the Green Party in almost all 50 states so that to get the Green Party off the ballot so that we can't even have access. And they're supposed to be the Democratic Party, the party of democracy. Yeah, right. So yeah, I mean, like, to help organize the Green Party out, I mean, we need people out there like you guys, whoever knows how to organize, whoever knows how to, you don't even have to know how to do stuff, just join the Green Party. But if you know how to do stuff, then do stuff within the Green Party, like organize, fundraise. We need leadership, obviously, right? So that's why I joined. I'm trying to help out. I'm trying to do what I can. So, we need more people like that, just people to come in.
By bourgeois ideas is people are very alienated from their own creative power. Part of the reason why people gravitate toward prepackaged solutions is we're not used to making things for ourselves. You want the independent left party we need. Well, we have to build it. And a lot of people faced with that don't have the skills, don't know what to do, don't have the patience, and it doesn't get done. So capitalism becomes politically self-sustaining because it is neutralizing people's ability, no matter how dissatisfied they get, to mount effective resistance. And I'm talking here about the psychological level. Of course, for those of us who do manage to overcome it in one way or another, then comes the police state. But for a lot of disgruntled people, the capitalists know they don't even need the police because they've got the internal tastes of these people set so that they won't even go toward an independent option that starts out a bit more ragtag because it's not, quote unquote, respectable. These are bourgeois prejudices that have been instilled in people from, decades of watching TV and reading magazines and everything else. All right, so let's get to the Bernie Sanders email. And credit and thanks to Brent Welder on Twitter for posting this. Dear Brent, tough times. The American people understand that our economic and political systems are rigged. They know that the very rich get much richer while almost everyone else becomes poorer. They know that we are moving rapidly into an oligarchic form of society.
I wouldn't say moving. We are. We always have been. That's how we started. That's what America is and was made to be.
Democrats ran a campaign protecting the status quo and tinkering around the edges.
Now he's going to...
Trump and the Republicans campaigned on change and on smashing the existing order. Not surprisingly, the Republicans won. Unfortunately, the, quote, change that Republicans will bring about will make a bad situation worse, and a society of gross inequality even more unequal, more unjust, and more bigoted. Will the Democratic leadership learn the lessons of their defeat and create a party that stands with the working class and is prepared to take on the enormously powerful special interests that dominate our economy, our media, and our political life? Highly unlikely.
Jeez.
The nerve of this guy.
Right?
They are too much wedded to the billionaires and corporate interests that fund their campaigns.
Then why is he talking like he is now? This is kind of a little bit crazy. This sounds like he would be starting a third party or helping the Green Party or DSA or something.
You're just noticing this or what? Given that reality, where do we go from here? That is the very serious question that needs a lot of discussion in the coming weeks and months. Or Like I said decades ago, but whatever. How do we expand our efforts to build a multiracial, multi-generational working class movement?
Build the
How do
Green
we
Party.
create a 50-state movement, not politics based on the Electoral College and, quote, battleground states? How do we deal with Citizens United and the ability of billionaires to buy elections? How do we recruit more working class candidates for office at all levels of government? Should we be supporting independent candidates who are prepared to take on both parties? I mean, yeah, but Bernie Sanders doesn't even meet that description. How do we better support union organizing? How do we put together listening sessions around the country that intentionally seek input from people who didn't vote for Democrats in the last election? How do we best use social media to build our movement? Whose movement? And combat the lies and disinformation coming from the billionaire class, billionaires are not a class, and right-wing media? How do we build sustainable and long-term issue-based organizing structures that live beyond individual campaigns? These are some of the political questions that together we need to address. Oh, now together we need to address. Where were you, Bernie? Where have you fucking been? Anyway, and it is absolutely critical that you make your voice heard during this process. Bernie, fuck you. Honestly, people who are actually left have moved on from Bernie Sanders, and probably actually will end up fighting Bernie Sanders in the struggles to come. Not me, us. That is the only way forward. Well, what happened to not me, us, when people didn't want you to drop out? No, then it was you, Bernie, because you were concerned about sucking up to your Democratic Party colleagues. So that's the Bernie Sanders email. I don't have a lot else to add, so let's close by reviewing Michael Parenti's comments on Bernie Sanders, delivered 8 or 9 years ago when Bernie was running in the first Democratic primary against Hillary Clinton, 2015-2016.
The question is, what is Dr. Parenti's view of Bernie Sanders?
Well, Bernie and I were very close friends for years. He'd come over my house when I lived in Washington, D.C. He came with his son once, and my son was visiting me. I made them dinner. Bernie and I both ran on the Liberty Union ticket in Vermont. I ran for the House of Representatives. Vermont has only one congressman, so you can't get gerrymandered out. But it meant I'd go up and down the whole state, and I got 7% of the vote. Bernie ran for Senate, U.S. Senate. He got 2% of the vote. Not that I'm trying to be committed. And very close to Bernie. His last words to me, I remember when he came to, where the hell was it? In Washington, I think it was. No, it was right in Berkeley, California, when I was living there. Bernie came to Oakland, and he said, "Where have you been? I haven't seen you. Stay in touch with me." I said, "Sure, I will, Bernie." But then came the Yugoslav war, and Bernie sided with President William Clinton and supported the bombing of Yugoslavia, 78 days and nights, depleted uranium, which has left Serbia today with the highest cancer rate in all of Europe. I vigorously opposed that war and wrote a book about it called To Kill a Nation, the attack on Yugoslavia. And Bernie, as I told Huck was a good friend. I forget Huck's last name. He was a professor from the university who took a leave to go work in Bernie's office when Bernie was now in the House of Representatives. Bernie went to the House of Representatives. He got elected mayor of Burlington and then House of Representatives and then the U.S. Senate. And now he's doing this try for the presidency. What was I saying just now?
What do you think of his campaign? And what do you think of his bid for the presidency?
No, there was something I wanted to say about this. I hate when this happens. When I get tired, that's what starts happening.
Later with the Yugoslav war.
Yugoslav war, yeah. I said he's standing shoulder to shoulder with NATO and the CIA and the White House and Bill Clinton and these creepos for a war against these people like this. I said I and that's when I broke with him. I stopped sending contributions. I stopped. Furthermore, his salary was way bigger than what I was making. And So when I saw that he was running, you know, and I put on the little thing to see some of the events with 10,000 people, I must admit I sat there and it was very touching, and I was so happy to see it. I was very happy to see Bernie getting up there, 10,000 people, and the powers that be have to deal with him in some way now. It's like a big blister in the way, and they got to deal with him and say, well, blah, blah. And mostly they don't say too much. They just concentrate on Donald Trump, you know. Yeah, I think it's great. The trouble is he's still not saying anything about foreign policy. He's still not criticizing. The empire feeds off the republic. We don't need an empire with 70 military bases, 700 military bases all over the world. We don't need to be fighting 2, 3, 4, 5 wars all at the same time. This is crazy. That's all. Bernie hasn't said a word about those things. He hasn't. He's just not said anything about it. So he's good on local issues. He's really, I think, he's a liberal Democrat. He's not a socialist or not even really a left progressive. He's just sort of he'd be a good liberal Democrat. But look at what he says. He says, and we want the rich to pay their share too. What do you mean? We want to stop having the rich rule our lives and rule our minds. That's what we want. And I think he could do a lot better on that. And he's going to have to say, it's not just me. I was alone years ago about his position on foreign policy, but a number of other people have brought it up now too. So he will have to start saying something about foreign policy, which would put him at odds with the national security state boys who play for keep. When you get into arguments with them, you got to be careful about your plane crashing or your car skidding and going off the road, or a lone assassin coming over and killing you. You know, as John Lennon happened to him, remember? And a few others, supposedly.
And keep coming back to Across the Spectrum.